Moses prays for death. Moses still had blessings for every single tribe, but when he perceived that his time had drawn to a close, he included them all in one blessing, saying, "Happy are you, O Israel! There is no other nation like you, a people saved by the Lord, the shield of your help, and the sword of your excellency." With these words, he at the same time answered a question that Israel had put to him, saying, "What is the blessing that God will bestow on us in the future world?" He replied, "I cannot describe it to you. All I can say is, you should be very happy." Moses at the same time begged God that in the future world he might restore to Israel the heavenly weapon he had taken away from them after the worship of the golden calf. God said, "I swear that I will restore it." When Moses had finished his blessing, he asked Israel to forgive his sternness towards them, saying, "You have had much to bear from me in regard to the fulfillment of the Torah and its commandments, but forgive me now." They replied, "Our teacher, it is forgiven." It was now their turn to ask his forgiveness. "We have often kindled your anger and laid many burdens on you, but forgive us now." Moses said, "It is forgiven." In the meanwhile, people came to him and said, "The hour has come for you to depart this world." Moses said, "Blessed be his name that lives and endures in all eternity." Turning to Israel, he then said, "When you have entered the land of Israel, remember me and my bones and say, Woe to the son of Amram, that ran before us like a horse, but whose bones remain in the desert." Israel said to Moses, "O our teacher Moses, what will become of us when you are gone?" He replied, "While I was with you, God was with you. But do not think that all the signs and miracles he wrought through me were performed for my sake, for rather they were done for your sake and for his love and mercy. And if you have faith in him, he will work your desires. Put not your trust in princes, nor in sons of man, in whom there is no help. For how could you expect help from a man, a creature of flesh and blood, who cannot even shield himself from death? Put, therefore, your trust in him, through whose word came the world, for he lives and endures for all eternity. Whether you be laden with sin or not, pour out your heart before him, and turn to him." Israel said, "The Lord, he is God. God is our strength and our refuge." Then a voice sounded from heaven and said, "Moses, why do you strive in vain? You have only 1/2 hour more of life in this world." Moses, to whom God had now shown the reward of the pious in the future world, and the gates of salvation and of consolation that God would hereafter open to Israel, now said, "Happy are you, O Israel! Who is like you, a people saved by the Lord?" He then said farewell to the people. Weeping aloud, he said, "Dwell in peace. I will see you again at the resurrection." And so he went from them, weeping aloud. Israel too broke into loud lamentations, so that their weeping ascended to the highest heavens. Moses took off his outer garment, tore his shirt, threw dust on his head, covered it like a mourner, and in this condition went to his tent amid tears and lamentations, saying, "Woe to my feet, that may not enter the land of Israel. Woe to my hands, that may not pluck of its fruits. Woe to my palate, that may not taste the fruits of the land that flows with milk and honey." Moses then took a scroll, wrote on it the ineffable name, and the book of the song, and went to Joshua's tent to deliver it to him. When he arrived at Joshua's tent, Joshua was seated, and Moses remained standing before him in a bowed attitude, without being noticed by Joshua. For God brought this to pass in order that Moses, on account of this disrespectful treatment, might himself wish for death. For when Moses had prayed to God to let him live, even if only as a private citizen, God granted his prayer, saying to him, If you have no objection to subordinating yourself to Joshua, then you may live." And in accordance with this agreement, Moses had come to hear Joshua's discourse. The people who had gathered as usual before Moses' tent to hear from him the word of God failed to find him there, and hearing that he had gone to Joshua, they also went there, where they found Moses standing and Joshua seated. "What are you thinking?" they called out to Joshua, "that you are seated while our teacher Moses stands before you in a bowed attitude with folded hands?" In their anger and indignation against Joshua, they would have instantly slain him, but a cloud descended and interposed itself between the people and Joshua. When Joshua noticed that Moses stood before him, he instantly arose and cried in tears, "O my father and teacher Moses, who like a father raised me from my youth and instructed me in wisdom, why do you do this thing that will bring on me divine punishment?" The people now besought Moses, as usual, to instruct them in the Torah, but he replied, "I have no permission to do so." They did not, however, cease begging him until a voice sounded from heaven and said, "Learn from Joshua." The people now consented to acknowledge Joshua as their teacher, and seated themselves before him to hear his discourse. Joshua now began his discourse with Moses sitting at his right and Aaron's sons, Eleazar and Ithamar, at his left. But hardly had Joshua begun his lecture with the words, "Praised be God, who takes delight in the pious and their teachings," when the treasures of wisdom vanished from Moses and passed over into Joshua's possession, so that Moses was not even able to follow his disciples' discourse. When Joshua had finished his lecture, Israel requested Moses to review with them what Joshua had taught, but he said, "I do not know how." Still he began to expound Joshua's lecture, but could not, for he had not understood it. He then said to God, "Lord of the world, I had begged you for life, but now I wish to die. I would rather die 100 times than be jealous once." Samael chastised by Moses. When God perceived that Moses was finally prepared to die, he said to the angel Gabriel, "Go, fetch Moses' soul." But Gabriel replied, "How can I presume to approach and take the soul of him that outweighs 60 myriads of mortals?" Then God commissioned the angel Michael to fetch Moses' soul, but he, amid tears, refused on the same grounds as Gabriel. God then said to the angel Zagzagel, "Fetch me Moses' soul." But he replied, "Lord of the world, I was his teacher, and he was my disciple. How can I take his soul?" Then Samael appeared before God and said, "Lord of the world, is Moses, Israel's teacher, indeed greater than Adam, who you created in your image and your likeness? Is Moses greater than your friend Abraham, who, to glorify your name, threw himself into the fiery furnace? Is Moses greater than Isaac, who permitted himself to be bound on the altar as a sacrifice to you? Or is he greater than your firstborn Jacob, or his 12 sons? Not one of them escaped me, so give me permission to fetch Moses' soul." God replied, "Not one of these equals Moses, so how can you take his soul? From his face, how could you approach his face that looked on my face? From his hands, those hands received the Torah. From his feet touched my clouds. No, you cannot approach him at all." But Samael said, "So it is, but still I pray you, permit me to fetch his soul." God said, "You have my consent." Samael now went forth from God with great happiness, took his sword, girded himself with cruelty, wrapped himself in wrath, and in a great rage went to Moses. When Samael saw Moses, Moses was occupied in writing the ineffable name. Darts of fire shot from his mouth, and the radiance of his face and eyes shone like the sun, so that he seemed like an angel of the hosts of the Lord. And Samael, in fear and trembling, thought, It was true when the other angels declared they could not seize Moses' soul. Moses, who had known that Samael would come, even before his arrival, now lifted his eyes and looked on Samael. Then Samael's eyes grew dim before the radiance of Moses' countenance. He fell on his face and was seized with the woes of a woman giving birth, so that in his terror he could not open his mouth. Moses therefore addressed him, saying, "Samael, there is no peace to the wicked. Why do you stand before me? Get out of here at once, or I will cut off your head." In fear and trembling, Samael replied, "Why are you angry with me, my master? Give me your soul, for your time to depart from this world is at hand." Moses: "Who sent you to me?" Samael: "He that created the world and all the souls." Moses: "I will not give you my soul." Samael: "All souls, since the creation of the world, were delivered into my hands." Moses: "I am greater than all others that came into the world. I have had a greater communion with the Spirit of God than you and yours together." Samael: "Wherein lies your preeminence?" Moses: "Do you not know that I am the son of Amram, that came circumcised out of my mother's womb, that at the age of 3 days not only walked, but even talked with my parents, and took no milk from my mother until she received her pay from Pharaoh's daughter? When I was 3 months old, my wisdom was so great I made prophecies and said, 'One day I will receive the Torah from God's right hand.' At the age of 6 months I entered Pharaoh's palace and took off the crown from his head. When I was 80 years old, I brought the 10 plagues on Pharaoh and the Egyptians, slew their guardian angel, and led 60 myriads of Israel out of Egypt. I then parted the sea into 12 parts, led Israel through the midst of them, and drowned the Egyptians. And it was not you that took their souls, but I. It was I, too, that turned the bitter water into sweet, that mounted into heaven and spoke face to face with God. I hewed 2 tables out of stone, on which God, at my request, wrote the Torah. 120 days and as many nights I dwelled in heaven, where I dwelled under the throne of glory. Like an angel during all this time, I ate no bread and drank no water. I conquered the inhabitants of heaven, made known their secrets to mankind, received the Torah from God's right hand, and at his command wrote 613 commandments, which I then taught to Israel. I furthermore waged war against the heroes of Sihon and Og, who had been created before the flood, and were so tall that the waters of the flood did not even reach their ankles. In battle with them, I told the sun and moon to stand still, and with my staff killed the 2 heroes. Where, perchance, is there in this world a mortal who could do all this? How dare you, you wicked one, presume to wish to seize my pure soul that was given to me in holiness and purity, by the Lord of holiness and purity? You have no power to sit where I sit, or stand where I stand. Get out. I will not give you my soul." Samael, now in terror, returned to God and reported Moses' words. God's wrath against Samael was now kindled, and he said to him, "Go, fetch me Moses' soul, for if you do not do so, I will discharge you from your office of taking men's souls, and will invest another with it." Samael implored God, saying, "O Lord of the world, tell me to go to Gehenna and turn it upside down, and I will do so without a moment's hesitation, but I cannot appear before Moses." God: "Why not?" Samael: "I cannot do it, because he is like the princes in your great chariot. Lightning and fiery darts issue from his mouth when he speaks, just as it is with the seraphim when they praise and glorify you. I pray you, therefore, send me not to him, for I cannot appear before him." But God said in wrath to Samael, "Go fetch me Moses' soul." And while he set about to execute God's command, the Lord furthermore said, "Out of the fire of hell you were created, and to the fire of hell you will eventually return. At first, in great joy, you set out to kill Moses, but when you perceived his grandeur and his greatness, you said, 'I cannot undertake anything against him.' It is clear and manifest before me that you will now return from him a second time in shame and humiliation. Samael now drew his sword out of his sheath, and in a towering fury went to Moses, saying, "Either I will kill him, or he will kill me." When Moses saw Samael, he arose in anger, and with his staff in hand, on which was engraved the ineffable name, he set out to drive Samael away. Samael fled in fear, but Moses pursued him, and when he reached him, he struck him with his staff, blinded him with the radiance of his face, and let him run on, covered with shame and confusion. He was close to killing him, but a voice resounded from heaven and said, "Let him live, Moses, for the world is in need of him." So Moses had to content himself with Samael's humiliation. God kisses Moses' soul. In the meanwhile, Moses' time was at an end. A voice from heaven resounded, saying, "Why, Moses, do you strive in vain? Your last second is at hand." Moses instantly stood up for prayer and said, "Lord of the world, be mindful of the day when you revealed yourself to me in the bush of thorns, and also the day when I ascended into heaven, and during the 40 days partook of neither food nor drink. You, gracious and merciful, deliver me not into the hand of Samael." God replied, "I have heard your prayer. I myself will attend to you and bury you." Moses now sanctified himself as do the seraphim that surround the divine majesty. Then God from the highest heaven revealed himself to receive Moses' soul. When Moses beheld the Holy One, blessed be he fell on his face and said, "Lord of the world, in love you created the world, and in love you guide it. Treat me with love, and deliver me not to the hands of the angel of death." A heavenly voice sounded and said, "Moses, be not afraid. Your righteousness will go before you. The glory of the Lord will be your reward." Then God descended from heaven with 3 angels, Michael, Gabriel, and Zagzagel. Gabriel arranged Moses' couch, Michael spread it with a purple garment, and Zagzagel laid down a woolen pillow. God stationed himself over Moses' head, Michael right, Gabriel to his left, and Zagzagel at his feet. Then God addressed Moses, "Cross your feet," and Moses did. He then said, "Fold your hands and lay them on your breast," and Moses did. Then God said, "Close your eyes," and Moses did. Then God spoke to Moses' soul. "My daughter, 120 years I decreed that you should live in the body of this righteous man, but do not hesitate to leave it now, for your time is run." The soul replied, "I know that you are the God of the spirits and of souls, and that in your hand are the souls of the living and the dead. You created me and put me into the body of this righteous man. Is there anywhere in the world a body so pure and holy as this? Never a fly rested on it. Never did leprosy show itself. Therefore, I love it, and I do not wish to leave it." God replied, "Do not hesitate, my daughter. Your end has come. I myself will take you to the highest heavens and let you dwell under the throne of my glory, like the seraphim, Ophanim, and cherubim, and other angels." But the soul replied, "O Lord of the world, I want to stay in the body of this righteous man. Look at the 2 angels Azza and Azazel. When they descended from heaven to earth, they corrupted their way of life and loved the daughters of the earth, so that in punishment you suspended them between heaven and earth. Moses, the son of Amram, a creature of flesh and blood, however, from the day you revealed yourself in the burning bush, has lived apart from his wife. Let me, therefore, remain where I am." When Moses saw that his soul refused to leave him, he said to her, "Is this because the angel of death wanted to show his power over you?" The soul replied, "No, God does not wish to deliver me into the hands of death." Moses, "Will you perchance weep when the others will weep at my departure?" The soul, "No, the Lord has delivered my eyes from tears." Moses, Will you perchance go into hell when I am dead? The soul, I will walk with the Lord in the land of the living. When Moses heard these words, he permitted his soul to leave him, saying to her, Return to your rest, O my soul, for the Lord has dealt bountifully with you. God then took Moses' soul by kissing him on the mouth. Moses' activity did not, however, cease with his death, for in heaven he is one of the servants of the Lord. God buried Moses in a spot that remained unknown, even to Moses himself. The grieving for Moses. When Moses died, a voice resounded from heaven throughout the whole camp of Israel, which measured 12 miles in length by 12 miles in width, and said, Woe to you! Moses is dead! Moses is dead! All Israel, who throughout the 30 days before Moses' death had wept, now arranged a 3 months' time of grieving. But Israel was not the only mourner. God himself wept for Moses, saying, Who will rise up for me against the evildoers? Who will stand up before the workers of iniquity? Metatron appeared before God and said, Moses was yours when he lived, and he is yours in death. God replied, I weep not for Moses' sake, but for the loss Israel suffered by his death. How often they angered me, but he prayed for them and appeased my wrath. The angels then wept with God, saying, But where will wisdom be found? The heavens lamented, The godly man is perished out of the earth. The earth wept, Now there is no one upright among men. Stars, planets, sun, and moon wailed, The righteous perish, and no man comprehends it. And God praised Moses' excellence in the words, You have said of me, The Lord, he is God, there is no one else. And therefore I will say of you, There arose no other prophet in Israel like Moses. Among mortals it was particularly Jochebed, Moses' mother, and Joshua, his disciple, that deeply mourned Moses' death. They were not even really certain if Moses was dead, so they looked for him everywhere. Jochebed went first to Egypt and said to that land, Mizraim, Mizraim, have you perchance seen Moses? But Mizraim replied, As truly as you live, Jochebed, I have not seen him since the day he slew all the firstborn. Jochebed then went to the Nile, saying, Nile, have you perchance seen Moses? But the Nile replied, As truly as you live, I have not seen Moses since the day he turned my water into blood. Then Jochebed went to the sea and said, Have you seen Moses? The sea replied, Truly as you live, I have not seen him since the day he led the 12 tribes through me. She then went to the desert and said, Desert, have you seen Moses? The desert replied, I have not seen him since the day he caused manna to rain down on me. Then Jochebed went to Sinai and said, Sinai, have you seen Moses? Sinai said, I have not seen him since the day he descended from me with the 2 tables of the law. Jochebed finally went to the rock and said, Rock, have you perchance seen Moses? The rock replied, I have not seen him since the day he hit me twice with his staff. Joshua too sought Moses in vain. In his grief for Moses' disappearance, he tore his garments, and crying aloud, he called ceaselessly, my father, the chariot of Israel, where will wisdom be found? But God said to Joshua, How long will you continue to seek Moses in vain? He is dead, but it is I that have lost him, not you. Samael's vain search. Samael, the angel of death, had not heard that God had taken Moses' soul from his body and received it under the throne of glory. Believing that Moses was still among the living, he went to Moses' house in order to seize his soul, for he feared to return before God without having executed his command to take Moses' soul. He did not, however, find Moses in his accustomed place, so he hurried to the land of Israel, thinking, Long did Moses pray to be permitted to enter this land, and perhaps he is there. He said to the land of Israel, Is Moses perchance with you? But the land replied, "No, he will not be found in the land of the living." Samael then went to Gehenna asking, "Have you seen Moses?" Gehenna replied, "With my ears I heard the cry, but I have not seen him." Then he went to the abyss and asked, "Have you seen the son of Amram?" The answer arose, "I have not seen him, but I did hear his call. He asked Korah's sons that dwell in the abyss. He hurried to paradise, the tree of life, the mountains, the deserts, Sinai, the birds, the animals, the court of the dead, all with similar results." When he asked the angels, "Have you seen Moses?" they advised him to go to the mortals, who might possibly give him information concerning Moses' whereabouts. So he went to the mortals and asked, "Where is Moses?" They replied, "Our teacher Moses is not like human beings. He is the peer of the angels of ministry, for he ascended into heaven and lived in heaven like the angels. He gathered the wind in his fists like an angel, and God took his soul to his very throne. What connection do you have with the son of Amram?" Moses excels all pious men. The special distinction that God granted Moses at his death was well merited, for Moses outweighed all the other pious men. When Moses died, Adam appeared and said, "I am greater than you, for I was created in God's image." But Moses replied, "I am nevertheless superior to you, for the glory you received from God was taken from you, whereas I retained the radiance of my face forever." Noah then said to Moses, "I am greater than you, for I was preserved out of the generation of the flood." Moses replied, "Still I am superior to you, for you saved yourself alone, and had not the power to save your generation. But I saved myself, and also saved my generation, at the time when they transgressed with the golden calf." Abraham said to Moses, "I am greater than you, for I fed the wanderers." Moses, "But I am superior to you, for you fed the uncircumcised, whereas I fed the circumcised, and you, moreover, fed them in a land of plenty, whereas I fed Israel in the desert." Isaac said to Moses, "I am greater than you, for I bared my neck on the altar and beheld the face of the Shekinah." Moses replied, "Still I am superior to you, for you did indeed behold the face of the Shekinah, but your eyes grew dim, whereas I talked with the Shekinah face to face, and neither my eyes grew dim, nor did my strength depart me." Jacob said, "I am greater than you, for I wrestled with the angel and conquered him." Moses replied, "You wrestled with the angel on your own turf, but I went up to the angels in their own territory, and still they feared me." Joseph said to Moses, "I am greater than you, for my master's wife could not tempt me to sin." Moses replied, "Still I am superior to you, for you restrained yourself from a strange woman, whereas I abstained from my own wife." The degree of Moses' superiority over the other pious men can be seen by the following. Adam died because he had been seduced by the serpent, whereas Moses fashioned a serpent out of brass, at the sight of which everyone who had been bitten by a snake recovered. Noah offered a sacrifice to God that was accepted, but he himself was not admitted to God's presence. When Moses, on the other hand, offered a sacrifice in Israel's name, God said to him, "Understand that twice daily I will live with you." Abraham had been the cause for Israel's bondage in Egypt, for that was the punishment for his words, "How will I know I will inherit the land?" Moses, on the other hand, delivered Israel out of Egyptian bondage. Jacob indeed conquered in his struggle with the angel, but the blow that the angel dealt him put Jacob's thigh out of joint forever, whereas Moses inspired the angels with such fear that as soon as they beheld him in heaven, they fled. But Moses not only surpassed all other human beings, he surpassed the entire creation. On the first day, God created light, but Moses mounted into heaven and seized the spiritual light, the Torah. On the second day, God created the firmament, when he decreed that the earth was not to enter the realm of the firmament, nor the firmament the realm of the earth. but Moses scaled the firmament even though he belonged to earth. On the third day, God created the sea, but as soon as the sea caught sight of Moses, it retreated before him, afraid. On the fourth day, God created the sun and the moon to illuminate the earth. But Moses said to God, I do not want the sun and the moon to give light to Israel, but you yourself should do so. And God granted his prayer. On the fifth day, God created the animals, but Moses slaughtered whatever animals he wanted for Israel's need. When, therefore, God laid all the objects of creation on one side of the scales and Moses on the other, Moses outweighed them. Moses was justly called the man of God, for he was half man and half with God. But not in this world alone was Moses the great leader and teacher of his people. He will be the same in the future world, in accordance with the promise God made him shortly before his death. God said, You that led my children in this world will also lead them in the future world. End Volume 3, The Legends of the Jews, compiled by Rabbi Louis Ginsberg. End Part 73 of 95, TheLegendsOfTheJews.com.